The rusty Martian wind howled against the dome of Research Station Olympus, but Dr. Sarah Chen barely noticed it anymore. After 3 years of archaeological excavations in the Valles Marineris, the constant background noise had become as familiar as breathing. She adjusted her holographic display, frowning at the anomalous readings from Dig Site 7. The quantum signatures made no sense. They appeared to predate human colonization of Mars by at least 50,000 years. Dr. Chen, you need to see this. Marcus Kim's voice crackled through her comm unit, excitement evident even through the static. Her research assistant had been overseeing the deep core sampling at the site. "We found something." "Well, you just need to see it yourself." Sarah grabbed her environment suit, performing the safety checks with practiced efficiency. 10 minutes later, she stood at the edge of a perfectly circular shaft that descended into the Martian bedrock. The excavation lights cast strange shadows on the smooth walls, which bore geometric patterns that were decidedly not natural. "It was hidden behind a quantum-locked barrier," Marcus explained, gesturing to his equipment. "We only detected it because of that new scanning algorithm you developed. But here's the weird part. The lock's encryption. It's based on human brainwave patterns." Sarah's heart raced. After decades of searching for proof of ancient civilizations on Mars, they'd found countless traces of bacterial life, but nothing like this. "How far down does it go?" "About 200 meters. And there's a chamber at the bottom." The descent was silent except for the whir of their suits' environmental systems. Each meter revealed more of the geometric patterns, which seemed to pulse faintly under their lights. Sarah's quantum scanner beeped continuously, registering energy signatures that shouldn't exist in structures this old. The chamber at the bottom took her breath away. It was a perfect sphere, perhaps 50 meters in diameter, with walls that seemed to be made of flowing light. At the center, suspended in a field of shimmering energy, was a simple pedestal with what looked like a handprint embedded in its surface. "This is impossible," Marcus whispered. "The quantum dating puts this at over 50,000 years old, but these are clearly human measurements, human proportions." Sarah approached the pedestal slowly, her scanner nearly overloading from the energy readings. "Look at these symbols." She gestured to the flowing patterns on the walls. "They're mathematical sequences, Fibonacci spirals, prime number series. But there's something else." She squinted at a particular sequence. "That's DNA encoding, human DNA encoding." Before Marcus could respond, a deep hum filled the chamber. Lines of light began racing along the geometric patterns, converging on the pedestal. A holographic display flickered to life above it, showing a rotating double helix. "Genetic verification required," announced a voice in perfect English. "Please place your hand on the scanner for civilization authentication." Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm. "Wait. We should call this in first. If this is some kind of first civilization site, we need to follow protocols." But Sarah barely heard him. She had spent her entire career searching for evidence that humanity wasn't alone in the universe, that we weren't just cosmic accidents. Now she stood before something that suggested an even more incredible possibility, that humanity's history was far deeper than anyone had imagined. She placed her hand on the pedestal. The chamber erupted with light. The holographic display expanded, filling the space with stars and galaxies. "Genetic sequence confirmed," the voice announced. "Human baseline detected. Initiating reactivation protocols." Suddenly, alarms blared from their suits' communication systems. Marcus pulled up his emergency display. "Something's happening up top. Massive energy signatures in orbit. Ships. There are ships appearing out of nowhere." The holographic display shifted, showing a fleet of vessels unlike anything humanity had ever built. They were organic curves and impossible geometries, technology so advanced it might as well have been magic, and they were descending toward Mars. "Alert," the chamber's voice announced calmly. "Galactic Council quarantine fleet detected. Standard containment protocols likely. Activating defense grid." Defense grid. Sarah's voice cracked. What defense grid? As if in answer, the ground beneath them trembled. Across Mars, ancient machines were awakening, systems that had lain dormant for millennia stirring to life. And in orbit, the alien fleet had come to a complete stop, frozen in space by forces they couldn't comprehend. A new voice crackled through their suits' communications, speaking in an alien language before shifting to heavily accented English. Attention human facility. This is Overseer Vax of the Galactic Council. You have activated restricted technology. Stand down immediately or face quarantine sanctions. The Chamber's AI responded before Sarah could. Negative, Overseer. By Council Law 147B, established in the Founding Compact, human genetic verification supersedes current administrative authority. Please stand by for historical database reactivation. Sarah stood transfixed as new holograms appeared, showing scenes that defied everything she thought she knew about human history. Cities that touched the stars, ships that folded space, and humans, ancient humans, standing among alien races, not as equals, but as teachers. Dr. Chen, Marcus whispered, what did you just do? She watched as more ships appeared in orbit, these bearing markings she somehow recognized despite never having seen them before. I think I just proved that everything we know about human history is wrong. The Chamber's eye spoke again, its tone almost gentle. Dr. Sarah Chen, you have initiated the last protocol. As the first verified human to access this facility, you are now designated as the recovery administrator. The truth of humanity's past and its purpose has been preserved here for 50,000 years, waiting for the right moment to be rediscovered. The holographic display focused on Earth, showing a cascade of similar facilities awakening. 50,000 years ago, humanity had stood at the height of technological achievement. They had seeded the stars, uplifted species, created the very foundations of what would become the Galactic Council. And then, for reasons yet unknown, they had chosen to forget it all. Why? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why would we give all this up? That information is contained in the historical archives, the AI replied. But a more pressing concern exists. The Council's arrival was anticipated. They have watched Earth for millennia, believing humans to be primitive beings who had yet to achieve spaceflight. The revelation of humanity's true heritage will cause considerable political upheaval. As if to emphasize this point, more alien ships were appearing in orbit, the communications channels filled with urgent chatter in dozens of languages. Humanity's quiet emergence into the galactic community had just become a lot more complicated. What do we do now? Marcus asked. Sarah stared at the swirling galaxies above her head, at the history of her species laid bare in light and shadow. This discovery would change everything. Humanity's place in the universe, their understanding of their own past, and most importantly, their future. Now, she said, straightening her shoulders, we find out why our ancestors chose to forget. And then we decide if we're ready to remember. The chamber hummed with ancient power, and across the solar system, more facilities were awakening. Humanity's lost legacy was stirring, and the galaxy would never be the same. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of emergency meetings and increasingly panicked communications from Earth. Sarah hadn't left the Martian chamber, partly because the Galactic Council ships still hung in orbit like frozen sculptures, and partly because she couldn't tear herself away from the historical archives, now streaming across the holographic displays. They're calling it the Great Awakening, Marcus said, passing her a fresh hydration pack. He'd refused to leave her side, documenting everything with scientific precision. Every museum, every archaeological site, even places we never knew were important, they're all lighting up with the same quantum signatures. Sarah barely nodded, transfixed by the scenes playing out before her. The archives showed humanity at its peak, a civilization that had mastered physics to such a degree that the line between science and magic had blurred completely. They hadn't just traveled between stars. They had written the fundamental protocols that allowed faster-than-light travel to work consistently across the galaxy. Administrator, the Chamber's AI interrupted her viewing. The Galactic Council's secondary response fleet has arrived. They are attempting to override the containment field. The holographic display shifted to show massive dreadnoughts joining the already substantial fleet in orbit. Their designs were diverse. Some looked like crystalline snowflakes, others like organic spheres of living metal, but all of them were now firing energy weapons at the invisible barrier protecting Mars. Barrier integrity at 99.99997%. The AI reported, almost smugly. Would you like me to demonstrate our defensive capabilities? No. Sarah straightened up. No demonstrations. Can you open a communication channel to their command ship? The largest vessel appeared in detail above her head, its crystalline structure gleaming. A moment later, a holographic figure materialized. Tall, elegant, with 4 arms and skin that looked like flowing mercury. I am High Commander Zixtal of the Galactic. But as Sarah began diving deeper into the archives, she couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Their ancestors hadn't just hidden this history to protect other species from misusing it. There was something else, something darker in the records, a threat that had influenced their decision. And as the galaxy's power structures began to shift and buckle under the weight of this revelation, that ancient threat was stirring too, awakened by the same protocols that had restored humanity's legacy. The real test wasn't just remembering who they had been. It was being ready for what was coming next. Sarah's eyes burned from staring at the holographic displays, but she couldn't stop reading. The archives revealed a history so vast, so complex, that even after a week of continuous study, she felt she'd barely scratched the surface. The chamber had become a hub of diplomatic activity, with representatives from both Earth governments and the Galactic Council coming and going through carefully controlled access points. You need to see this, Marcus called from his workstation. He'd been analyzing data patterns in the quantum network, looking for signs of the threat their ancestors had feared. I think I found something in the deep code. Before Sarah could respond, alarms blared through the chamber. The AI's voice was urgent. Multiple unauthorized quantum space ruptures detected. Council hardliner fleet emerging. The holographic display shifted to show dozens of warships appearing around Mars, their weapons already charging. Unlike the previous Council vessels, these ships bore no official markings. Leading them was a massive dreadnought that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Attention human facility. A harsh voice transmitted. I am Supreme Guardian Kral of the Purity faction. Your species' claim to authority threatens the stability of the galaxy. Surrender control of the quantum network, or we will be forced to take decisive action. Sarah exchanged glances with Marcus. The archives had warned about the Purity faction, a secretive group within the Council who believed in technological supremacy. The revelation that their advanced technology had come from primitive humans would be anathema to them. Supreme Guardian, Sarah responded carefully. Your actions violate Council law. Stand down your weapons. Laws built on lies. Kral's voice crackled with rage. We rebuilt this civilization from nothing, evolved beyond our base origins. We will not be subjugated by talking primates who stumbled upon their ancestors' toys. The Chamber's AI interrupted. Administrator, I'm detecting quantum signature anomalies in their weapons. They've modified them, corrupted the original protocols. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized what that meant. The archives had shown how humanity's quantum network was designed with inherent safeguards, preventing certain types of destructive applications. The Purity faction had found ways around those safeguards. That's what our ancestors feared, Marcus whispered, looking up from his data analysis. Not just the misuse of their technology, but its corruption. The quantum network wasn't just for communication and travel. It was maintaining something, containing something. As if in response to his words, new information began flowing across the displays. Star maps appeared, showing strange dark zones in the galaxy. places where the quantum network actively suppressed something ancient and malevolent. Your ancestors were cowards, Krull transmitted. They ran from their responsibilities, hiding behind moral excuses. We will do what they could not. Push beyond all limitations. Achieve true transcendence. The chamber's AI spoke urgently. Administrator, their weapons fire will breach the containment field in approximately 3 minutes. But there's something else. Their modifications to the quantum network are having an unforeseen effect on the suppression zones. Sarah's mind raced as she connected the pieces. Their ancestors hadn't chosen to forget because they feared their technology would be misused. They'd chosen to forget because maintaining the quantum network required a specific kind of consciousness, a balance that humanity had achieved, but feared losing. They'd hidden their legacy until their descendants could rediscover that balance naturally. Marcus, she called, show me those deep code patterns you found. The display shifted, showing lines of quantum programming so complex they appeared almost organic. But there were irregularities now, spreading like cracks in reality itself. The Purity faction's corrupted technology was unraveling something fundamental. Guardian Krull. Sarah tried one last time. You don't understand what you're doing. The quantum network isn't just technology. It's a containment system. Our ancestors. Our sensors detect no such containment system. Krull interrupted. More human lies. Open fire. Energy beams lanced from the... But as Sarah began diving deeper into the archives, she couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Their ancestors hadn't just hidden this history to protect other species from misusing it. There was something else, something darker in the records, a threat that had influenced their decision. And as the galaxy's power structures began to shift and buckle under the weight of this revelation, that ancient threat was stirring too, awakened by the same protocols that had restored humanity's legacy. The real test wasn't just remembering who they had been. It was being ready for what was coming next. Sarah's eyes burned from staring at the holographic displays, but she couldn't stop reading. The archives reveal a history so vast, so complex, that even after a week of continuous study, she felt she barely scratched the surface. The chamber had become a hub of diplomatic activity, with representatives from both Earth governments and the Galactic Council coming and going through carefully controlled access points. You need to see this, Marcus called from his workstation. He'd been analyzing data patterns in the quantum network, looking for signs of the threat their ancestors had feared. I think I found something in the deep code. Before Sarah could respond, alarms blared through the chamber. The AI's voice was urgent. Multiple unauthorized quantum space ruptures detected. Council hardliner fleet emerging. The holographic display shifted to show dozens of warships appearing around Mars, their weapons already charging. Unlike the previous Council vessels, these ships bore no official markings. Leading them was a massive dreadnought that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Attention human facility, a harsh voice transmitted. I am Supreme Guardian Krull of the Purity faction. Your species' claim to authority threatens the stability of the galaxy. Surrender control of the quantum network, or we will be forced to take decisive action. Sarah exchanged glances with Marcus. The archives had warned about the Purity faction, a secretive group within the Council who believed in technological supremacy. The revelation that their advanced technology had come from primitive humans would be anathema to them. Supreme Guardian, Sarah responded carefully. Your actions violate Council law. Stand down your weapons. Laws built on lies. Krull's voice crackled with rage. We rebuilt this civilization from nothing, evolved beyond our base origins. We will not be subjugated by talking primates who stumbled upon their ancestors' toys. The chamber's AI interrupted. Administrator, I'm detecting quantum signature anomalies in their weapons. They've modified them, corrupted the original protocols. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized what that meant. The archives had shown how humanity's quantum network was designed with inherent safeguards, preventing certain types of destructive applications. The Purity faction had found ways around those safeguards. That's what our ancestors feared, Marcus whispered, looking up from his data analysis. Not just the misuse of their technology, but its corruption. The quantum network wasn't just for communication and travel. It was maintaining something, containing something. As if in response to his words, new information began flowing across the displays. Star maps appeared, showing strange dark zones in the galaxy, places where the quantum network actively suppressed something ancient and malevolent. Your ancestors were cowards, Krull transmitted. They ran from their responsibilities, hiding behind moral excuses. We will do what they could not. Push beyond all limitations. Achieve true transcendence. The chamber's AI spoke urgently. Administrator, their weapons fire will breach the containment field in approximately 3 minutes. But there's something else. Their modifications to the quantum network are having an unforeseen effect on the suppression zones. Sarah's mind raced as she connected the pieces. Their ancestors hadn't chosen to forget because they feared their technology would be misused. They'd chosen to forget because maintaining the quantum network required a specific kind of consciousness, a balance that humanity had achieved, but feared losing. They'd hidden their legacy until their descendants could rediscover that balance naturally. Marcus, she called, show me those deep code patterns you found. The display shifted, showing lines of quantum programming so complex they appeared almost organic. But there were irregularities now, spreading like cracks in reality itself. The Purity faction's corrupted technology was unraveling something fundamental. Guardian Krull. Sarah tried one last time. You don't understand what you're doing. The quantum network isn't just technology. It's a containment system. Our ancestors. Our sensors detect no such containment system. Krull interrupted. More human lies. Open fire. Energy beams lanced from the Purity faction ships, striking the containment field around Mars. The chamber shuddered, but Sarah barely noticed. She was watching in horror as the quantum anomalies began spreading faster. Administrator. The AI's voice held something like fear now. The suppression zones are failing. Long-range sensors detect movement. New alarms blared as ancient warning systems activated across the galaxy. In the deep void between stars, something stirred. The very fabric of space-time began to twist as age-old barriers weakened. Oh God, Marcus breathed, looking at his readings. That's why they needed the quantum network. That's why they had to maintain that specific consciousness. They weren't just building an infrastructure for civilization. They were creating a wall. A wall against what? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to understand from the archive's warnings. Before anyone could respond, reality itself seemed to shudder. The holographic displays flickered, showing vast dark shapes moving in the spaces between stars. Ancient things that had been imprisoned since before humanity's ancestors first looked up at the sky with conscious thought. Administrator, the AI reported, quantum breach detected in Suppression Zone 7. Entity emergence imminent. Purity faction weapons have destabilized the containment protocols. Sarah watched as the first of the ancient horrors emerged from its prison, its form defying conventional physics. The Purity faction ships, still focused on Mars, hadn't even noticed yet. We have to restore the containment field, she said urgently. How? How did our ancestors? New information flowed from the archives, showing her exactly what needed to be done. But it would require something unprecedented, a complete reactivation of humanity's consciousness link to the quantum network. Not just remembering their legacy, but reclaiming it fully. If we do this, Marcus said quietly, there's no going back. We'll remember everything, become everything they were. Sarah looked at the approaching cosmic horror, at the Purity faction ships still firing uselessly at Mars, at the quantum network straining to maintain what remained of the suppression zones. Their ancestors had chosen to forget because they feared losing their way. Now their descendants had to choose to remember, not for power, but for survival. She placed her hand on the central console. Better to remember who we were than to let the galaxy fall to something worse. Initiate full reactivation. All systems, all sites, all protocols. As the chamber blazed with light and knowledge began flooding back into humanity's collective consciousness, Sarah could only hope they were ready for what came next. The real war wasn't against the Purity faction, or even the Council. It was against something far older and far worse. The knowledge hit like a tidal wave. Sarah gasped as 50,000 years of human history flooded into her consciousness. She wasn't alone. Across Earth and its colonies, humanity was remembering. Scientists solved complex equations they'd never seen before. Engineers suddenly understood technologies they'd been struggling to reverse engineer. Children woke from dreams speaking languages that hadn't been heard in millennia. Neural integration at 60% and rising, the AI reported. Quantum network realignment in progress. Through the chamber's displays, Sarah watched as the first of the ancient horrors, the Void Hunters, she now remembered their name, emerged fully into normal space. It was vast beyond comprehension, a being of twisted physics and impossible geometries. The Purity faction ships near it looked like motes of dust before a hurricane. Guardian Krell, she transmitted, cease fire and withdraw immediately. You've awakened something far worse than humans with too much power. The response came not from Krell, but from one of his subordinate ships. Their sensors had finally detected the cosmic entity. Panic was evident in the alien voice. By the void, what is that thing? Sarah's newly awakened memories provided the answer. The Void Hunters were remnants of the universe that existed before this one, beings that fed on reality itself. Humanity's ancestors had discovered them during their first experiments with quantum space travel, finding the barriers between dimensions weakened by their presence. Full neural integration achieved, the AI announced. Administrator, you now have complete access to humanity's quantum consciousness network. The knowledge settled into place, no longer overwhelming but simply there, as natural as breathing. Sarah understood now why their ancestors had created the quantum network. It wasn't just for communication or travel. It was a vast consciousness web that regulated the very fabric of space-time, keeping the Void Hunters imprisoned in artificial pocket dimensions. Marcus, she called. Status of the other suppression zones. He didn't need to check his instruments anymore. Like her, he could feel the quantum network directly. Failing. The Purity faction's corrupted weapons did more damage than we thought. We have maybe hours before total containment failure. Through the displays, they watched the first Void Hunter turn its attention to the Purity faction fleet. Reality distorted around the ships as the entity began to feed. Matter and energy twisted, folded, vanished into geometries that shouldn't exist. All Council vessels, Sarah broadcast on all frequencies, fall back to these coordinates immediately. Standard weapons are useless against these entities. You expect us to trust you. Krell's voice had lost its arrogance, replaced by fear. After what you've hidden. Administrator. The AI interrupted. Secondary emergence detected in Suppression Zone 12. 3 more Void Hunters approaching normal space. Sarah closed her eyes, accessing humanity's restored knowledge. The quantum network had been designed as both prison and shield, powered by the collective consciousness of an entire species. But maintaining that focus, that perfect balance of thought and purpose, had proven too difficult. Their ancestors had chosen to forget rather than risk the network failing due to their own internal conflicts. We don't have time for trust issues, she transmitted. The Void Hunters don't distinguish between species. They consume everything. Your weapons disrupted the quantum barriers holding them back. Only humanity's original containment protocols can stop them. As if to emphasize her point, the first Void Hunter finished with the ships it had caught. Where a dozen mighty vessels had been, there was now only twisted, empty space. The entity turned its attention to Mars, and Sarah felt its ancient hunger through the quantum network. The containment protocols, Marcus said quietly, they require full species-wide neural synchronization, everyone working in perfect harmony. Sarah nodded, which is why our ancestors failed. They couldn't maintain that level of unity. The power they wielded, the knowledge they had. It led to factions, to conflicts, just like what's happening with the Council now. Through the quantum network, she could feel humanity struggling with their returned memories. Some wanted to use their restored power to dominate, to punish the Council for keeping them ignorant. Others were overwhelmed by the responsibility, wanting to forget again. The very discord that had forced their ancestors' choice was threatening to repeat. Secondary entities have breached normal space, the AI reported. Time to total containment failure. 3 hours, 17 minutes. Sarah made her decision. She opened a channel not just to the Council ships, but to every quantum-capable receiver in the galaxy. Her voice, carried by the original protocols, reached every world, every ship, every station. This is Dr. Sarah Chen, speaking with the full authority of humanity's quantum legacy. What you're seeing isn't an invasion or a power play. It's a containment breach. 50,000 years ago, humanity created the quantum network not to rule the galaxy, but to save it. We chose to forget because we couldn't maintain the unity needed to keep these ancient horrors imprisoned. Now we remember, but memory isn't enough. We need something our ancestors didn't have. She paused, watching as more void hunters emerged, as ships fled, as panic spread across the galaxy. Then she continued, "We need you, all of you. The quantum network can be modified to accept other consciousness patterns. The Council species working together with humanity, we might achieve the harmony our ancestors couldn't find alone." "Impossible," Kral transmitted, even as his flagship retreated from an approaching void hunter. "The power requirements alone." "Check your systems," Sarah instructed. "Your ships are already part of the quantum network. They always have been. You've been using our technology for millennia. Now use it properly. Join your consciousness to ours. Help us restore the barriers." She could feel the resistance, the fear, the pride. But she could also feel something else through the quantum network: understanding. Species after species, experiencing for the first time the true purpose of the technology they'd been using. Seeing not just the power humanity had wielded, but the responsibility they'd accepted. The first to join were the archive masters, their crystalline minds sliding easily into the quantum harmony. Others followed: scientists, explorers, those driven by curiosity and hope rather than fear. Even some of the Purity faction ships, their crews faced with extinction, chose to link in. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. And the Void Hunters were still coming. Sarah watched through 1,000,000 quantum-linked eyes as the ancient horrors approached Mars. Time was running out, and the hardest part was still to come. Because even with other species joining the network, success would require something more. Humanity would have to prove they had grown beyond their ancestors' limitations. They would have to stay unified in the face of ultimate power, to choose wisdom over dominance, cooperation over control. The future of the galaxy depended on humanity remembering not just how to use their ancient power, but why they had chosen to lock it away. And this time, they had to find a better answer. The Void Hunters moved like oil through water, their impossible forms distorting the very space around Mars. Through the quantum network, Sarah felt the terror of billions as the ancient horrors approached populated systems. The combined consciousness of humanity and their alien allies struggled to maintain coherence in the face of such cosmic horror. Containment protocols at 20% effectiveness, the AI reported. Current network harmony insufficient for full barrier restoration. Sarah stood in the chamber, now a nexus point of quantum consciousness streaming in from across the galaxy. Through the network, she experienced everything at once. Council ships maneuvering desperately around dimensional tiers, colonies evacuating as space itself began to warp, and the growing realization across all species that this threat transcended their political squabbles. "We need more," Marcus said, his consciousness intertwined with the network. "Even with the Council species joining us, we're not achieving the level of harmony the original barriers required." Sarah accessed the deepest archives, searching through humanity's restored memories. Their ancestors had faced this same challenge: the need for perfect unity in the face of extinction. They had failed, their fears and ambitions creating subtle discords in the quantum harmony that eventually forced them to choose between eternal vigilance or strategic amnesia. Administrator, the AI warned, Void Hunter approaching Mars. Impact in 15 minutes. Through the network, Sarah felt Krell's flagship moving to join the defensive line around Mars, its crew finally linking fully into the quantum consciousness. The Supreme Guardian's thoughts touched hers. Tell us what you need, human. Whatever our differences, we face extinction together. Sarah smiled sadly. That's just it. Our ancestors had the knowledge, the technology, the power, everything except the ability to trust completely. Not just their own kind, but all sentient life. They could have modified the network to accept other species from the beginning, but they feared losing control. She felt the truth of it rippling through the combined consciousness of the network. Humanity's ancestors had created wonders, but they had also created barriers, not just against the Void Hunters, but between themselves and other intelligent life. Their choice to forget hadn't just been about maintaining focus. It had been about giving their descendants a chance to evolve beyond those limitations. The chamber shuddered as the nearest Void Hunter's presence began affecting local space-time. Sarah watched through countless linked minds as reality buckled around the entity. Ships caught in its wake didn't explode or break apart. They simply ceased to exist in comprehensible space. Full containment failure in 10 minutes, the AI announced. Administrator, the network requires greater harmony than is currently achievable with voluntary links. Sarah understood what it meant. Through the quantum protocols, she could force the connection, override individual consciousness to achieve perfect synchronization. The knowledge of how to do it was there in humanity's restored memories. It would save the galaxy. It would also prove that humanity hadn't grown beyond their ancestors' failures. No, she said firmly, her voice carrying through the network to every linked mind. We don't need forced harmony. We need to understand what our ancestors didn't. That true strength comes from choosing to trust, to cooperate, to believe in something greater than ourselves. She opened herself completely to the network, dropping every mental barrier, every defense. Her consciousness flowed out like water, touching every linked mind with total transparency. Through the quantum connection, she shared not just humanity's knowledge, but their hopes, their fears, their dreams of a universe united not by force or technology, but by choice. Join us, she broadcast, her thoughts carrying the weight of 50,000 years of human experience. Not because you have to, but because you choose to. Not in submission, but in true partnership. Our ancestors built walls to save the universe. Let's build bridges instead. For a moment, nothing happened. The Void Hunter loomed closer, its presence beginning to affect the chamber's structural integrity. Sarah felt Marcus's consciousness next to hers, equally open, equally vulnerable. Then, one by one, minds began to open across the network. The archive masters shared their millennia of accumulated knowledge. The Purity faction revealed their deepest fears of insignificance. Species after species dropped their mental defenses, adding their unique perspectives and experiences to the quantum harmony. Each mind that opened fully strengthened the network, not through forced synchronization, but through willing cooperation. Quantum harmony at 70%, the AI reported. 80%, 90%. Sarah felt the change in the network as the last barriers fell. This wasn't the rigid, enforced unity of humanity's ancestors. This was something new, a harmony of diverse consciousness patterns, each unique yet working in perfect concert. The knowledge of 50,000 years ago flowed freely now, not as a weapon or a tool of control, but as a shared inheritance. Containment protocols reactivating, the AI announced. Quantum barriers regenerating. Reality itself seemed to flex as the combined power of the quantum network engaged. The Void Hunters, moments from reaching Mars, encountered something they had never faced before. A barrier built not from the consciousness of one species maintaining control, but from the willing cooperation of many choosing to work together. The entities fought against the new containment field, their impossible forms twisting as they sought weaknesses. But there were no weaknesses to find. Every mind in the network adapted instantly to each attack, the shared consciousness allowing for perfect coordination without sacrificing individual creativity. Primary entities returning to containment, the AI reported. Quantum barriers at full strength. New protocols. Evolving. Through the network, Sarah felt the change. The quantum barriers were no longer static constructs requiring constant maintenance. They were living things now, growing and adapting with the combined creativity of every linked consciousness. The very foundation of reality was being rewritten not by humanity alone, but by all sentient life working in concert. Hours later, when the last Void Hunter had been sealed away and the quantum barriers had stabilized, Sarah finally allowed herself to relax. The chamber was crowded now with holographic representations of leaders from across the galaxy, all still linked through the new quantum network. What happens now? Marcus asked the question everyone was thinking. Sarah looked at the assembled representatives, former enemies and allies alike, all changed by what they had experienced. Now we do what our ancestors couldn't. We move forward together. Their quantum network was built to contain a threat. Let's rebuild it to connect worlds, to share knowledge, to explore the universe as partners. And the knowledge? Krell asked, his earlier hostility replaced with something like wonder. Humanity's legacy is now everyone's legacy, Sarah replied. Not given, not taken, but shared freely. That's what our ancestors wanted for us, even if they couldn't achieve it themselves. They gave us the tools, but we had to find the wisdom to use them properly. The quantum network hummed with approval, countless minds working together to begin building something new. Humanity had remembered their past, not to reclaim lost glory, but to fulfill their original purpose, not as rulers or guardians, but as teachers and partners in the greatest collaboration in universal history. As the work of rebuilding began, Sarah felt the truth that had eluded their ancestors. True power wasn't about control or dominance. It was about the strength to remain open, to trust, to grow beyond your own limitations by helping others grow with you. The last protocol hadn't just been about remembering humanity's past. It had been about choosing humanity's future. And now, that future would be written not by one species alone, but by all sentient life working together in a harmony their ancestors had never imagined possible.